While we were out shopping, I stopped to tie my shoelace. When I looked up again, my boyfriend, Robert, and my best friend Mia were already 10 feet ahead. I was about to step forward to catch up, but the space between them, the space that had always been mine, was slowly closing. They fell into step side by side, picking up a conversation I had no way of joining, as if there had never been a third person there at all. Back in school, Robert and Mia were the ones everyone called gifted. After graduation, Robert and Mia became the youngest, attending physicians at the hospital. No matter how hard I pushed myself, I could only trail behind them, just another ordinary nurse. Robert would always ruffle my hair and say, "You're adorable, even when you're clueless." Then he'd turn around and seamlessly perform one complex surgery after another, with Mia watching their backs. Suddenly felt exhausted. This road I had been walking, always chasing after Robert, I didn't want to walk it anymore. We turned the corner and Robert and Mia disappeared from view entirely, not once from start to finish. Had either of them turned around to check if I was keeping up? I stood there quietly for a moment and turned and walked away. Back at the hospital, a coworker raised an eyebrow and leaned over. "Didn't you switch shifts to go on a date? That was fast." "Yeah, it's done." I changed into my scrubs and sat back down at my station. The hospital kept us all busy. Over the course of a year, Robert and I had been on proper dates fewer than 10 times. Today he had a rare day off, and I'd called in a favor with a coworker to swap shifts in advance. I thought that even just holding hands and walking around the neighborhood together would be enough. Then Mia showed up out of nowhere and threw everything off. Before we left, I'd made a point of telling them with a straight face not to talk about work. Not one word. Both of them had pinched my cheeks and nodded eagerly. Okay, we get it." But halfway through dinner, someone brought it up, and before long, the two of them were going back and forth about patient cases. I sat there beside them, pushing rice around my plate. I don't even remember when the check was paid. Then the landline at the nurse's station rang, snapping me back. My coworker had already picked up a car accident up north. Several people were being rushed into the ER. I was about to text Robert when a message from him came through. "First patient came in. Nia and I are heading back to the hospital." I turned the screen off and sat there blank. He still hadn't asked, not even once, where I had gone. After my last procedure of the day, I ran into Robert in the hallway. He looked worn out. I kept my eyes straight ahead and didn't fall into my usual habit of fussing over him. But the moment we crossed paths, he caught my wrist. He buried his face in the curve of my neck, a habit of his. "What's wrong? Don't recognize your own boyfriend?" Every time he came home after a long shift, he'd do this, said it was how he recharged my mind, told me to pull away, but there was a dull ache spreading through my chest that I couldn't explain. It had taken me 3 years to go from quietly loving Robert to actually standing by his side. The day we got together, someone in our cohort immediately started a side bet on how long we'd last because, honestly, the gap between us was hard to ignore. Robert had been at the top of his class every single year, me since elementary school. I'd had teachers point fingers in my face and call me stupid. The one who'd stepped in front of me with open arms back then was Nia. I knew I wasn't the smart one. I always needed Robert's patience and Nia's encouragement, just to keep going. So even though I had made up my mind, the moment he leaned in close, all that resentment I had been holding on to began quietly dissolving. We sat together in an empty stairwell. It was a rare moment alone in the silence. Robert finally spoke. "Maya? Yeah. Can you try to act a little more mature from now on?" I blinked, got off guard. After a long pause, I slowly turned to look at him. "What?" His eyes were closed. His voice was flat. "The way you talk about the weather this afternoon. You disappeared without saying a word. You had Nia and me worried sick. We both finally had a day off. Even if you don't care about me, you could at least consider Nia. She's not your babysitter." I didn't move, but I felt like something inside me had cracked open, and cold air was rushing in. "Worried about me? Then why wasn't there a single call or text on my phone? Was it worry, or was I just ruining their day? Look at you. I say 2 things and you're already crying." Robert's expression was full of resignation. The way he looked at me was the way you look at a child who refuses to grow up. I dropped my head. Tears hit the front of my shirt, being a damp patch. "Okay, it won't happen again." He sighed and patted the top of my head. "Go home and get some rest. Nia and I still need to go over treatment plan." After Robert left, my phone rang. It was my dad. "Hey, sweetheart. Didn't you say you were bringing your boyfriend over for dinner?" "Still at work." I pressed my hand hard over my mouth so he wouldn't hear me break. Honey, Maya, it took a while before I could speak normally. Dad, he's not coming at dinner. My parents could tell something was wrong. They kept piling food onto my plate. When I sat down my fork, I took a slow breath. I don't want to be a nurse anymore. They both stared at me. Didn't you say you'd repeat a whole year of high school just to get into nursing school? Are you having a rough time at work? Don't give up on your dream over a bad stretch. I shook my head without saying anything. Medicine was Robert's dream. It had never been mine. It started during a late study session in our senior year. He reached out his hand to me. Maya, work a little harder. Let's be together. Always. For that one sentence, I threw myself headfirst onto the road, chasing after him. What followed were years of dense medical terminology, precise and unforgiving procedures, and nights that never seemed to end. Things that came easily to everyone else took me 10 times the effort, sometimes 100. Once I started working, I had to stay alert every single hour, terrified of betraying a patient's trust. And even then, all Robert would do is cut my face and say, "Watch how, Nia. Does it stop being so scattered on the floor?" I was his girlfriend, but it had been a long time since he had looked at me like an equal. The next day at lunch, I submitted my resignation and went to the cafeteria to eat. Nia carried her tray over and sat down across from me. She slid half of her tomato scramble into my bowl and studied my face. "You were crying last night, aren't you?" I looked up, not sure what she meant. Nia looked mildly surprised. "Nia and I worked so late, we just got a room at the hotel for the night," she said. "Robert just told me he forgot to let you know. He figured you'd be upset. I had slept at my own place last night and had no idea whether Robert had come home. And honestly, it didn't matter anymore." I kept eating. "Is that so?" Nia tilted her head, studying me with wide eyes. "Wait, you're really not upset? Then someone owes me a yogurt." She spun around. Robert appeared from behind me, placed a yogurt in Mia's palm, then sat down next to me. He frowned slightly. "Are Maya's finally growing up? Normally, this would have set you off for 3 days straight. Hey, Maya is not like that." And just like that, the two of them launched into a debate about who knew me better. I sat between them, and everything became noise. My hands were shaking around my utensils. A wave of nausea rolled through me. The two people closest to me in the world were placing bets on my emotions. I turned to Robert. Slowly. My voice came out steady. "I want to break up the table," went quiet. Robert stared at me. "You." Before he could finish, Nia leaned over carefully. "Maya, are you mad at me? Last night was really just work. I didn't ask him to stay." Robert's brow tightened when he looked back at me. The prize in his eyes had curdled into irritation. He took my words as a tantrum and spoke coolly. "It's fine, Nia. You don't need to explain yourself. She's always like this dramatic. It exhausts everyone around her." Nia opened her mouth to say something. Robert pulled her away. I was left alone at the table. I threw out most of my food and went to submit my resignation to the head nurse. She didn't try very hard to talk me out of it. She just said the process would take at least a month. Back at my station, a coworker hesitated before sliding up next to me. "Maya, did you and Dr. Robert break up?" He hadn't agreed to it, but as far as I was concerned, we were over. I nodded. She exhaled slowly. "That explains it. A patient got aggressive earlier and shoved Dr. Mia. Dr. Robert picked her up right away and rushed her to the himself. I was watching. She barely even fell, but he completely panicked. My brow pulled together. Did she hurt her hand? The resentment hadn't gone anywhere, but my legs were already moving toward the before I'd made the decision. Back in school, Nia used to throw an arm around my shoulder and announce to no one in particular, "I'm going to be the best cardiothoracic surgeon in the country. Nia, I've got your back." Once we're both at the hospital, if her hand was injured, how would she ever operate again? Every bad possibility tangled together in my head as I walked. By the time I got there, Mia was lying on the exam table, eyes red. "Mia, are you okay?" I crossed the room quickly. She spotted me and managed a small smile. "I'm fine. Just twisted my ankle." I had barely breathed in relief when Robert's voice cut through, flat and cold, satisfied. "Mia?" I had no idea what he meant. "If you hadn't thrown a fit, I wouldn't have come after you to smooth things over. She wouldn't have been in the way of that patient." His words pinned me to the floor. I couldn't think straight. Mia was already pushing at his arm. "Why are you blaming Maya? That's not fair." But Robert kept his eyes on me. "Why haven't you grown up after all these years? You always make everyone adjust around you. Who do you think you are?" Silence. Something hot was slipping out of the corners of my eyes again. as if he'd finally noticed how sharp his words had been. Softened slightly. Just try to be calmer going forward, okay? He reached out to wipe my tears. I turned my head and stepped back. Dr. Robert, we've already broken up. Please don't speak to me like that. Robert let out a short, believing laugh. Maya, enough. Even Nia looked at me with disapproval. Stop being stubborn. Honestly, they were more alike than either of them knew. Neither of them could ever really see what I said, what I felt, or who I was. I pulled up a bitter smile and walked out. The days that followed, Robert gave me the silent treatment. Between that and my own efforts to avoid him, we somehow went half a month without exchanging a single word. But he was the hospital's golden boy, and gossip about him never stopped. Word was that he brought Nia a fresh-cut steak every single day, while she recovered. Word was that they co-authored a paper published in a major journal, and got recognized by the chief of staff. When coworkers asked me for updates, I just shook my head. I didn't know anything. One afternoon, Nia stopped me in the hallway. She caught my sleeve like it was the most natural thing in the world. Maya, did you really stop talking to me just because you and Robert fought? Come on, you two are both impossible. Let me be the bridge here. Just meet him halfway, please. I looked at my best friend of so many years and felt something cold and unfamiliar wash over me. We had known each other longer. I hadn't done anything wrong. So why did she always take a side? Nia's hand remained on my sleeve, her fingers light but persistent, as if she could hold the pieces of our old life together by sheer force of habit. Maya, she repeated, her voice softening into that familiar, soothing tone she used when explaining a difficult diagnosis to a patient's family. Did you really stop talking to me just because you and Robert fought? Come on, you two are both impossible. Let me be the bridge here. Just meet him halfway, please. I looked down at her fingers. For years, those hands had been my anchor. When the teachers in middle school had sighed over my report cards, Nia had taken my hand and whispered, "Don't listen to them. We'll study together. I'll make sure you get it." I had loved her for it. I had let her protect me, never realizing that the price of her protection was my permanent status as the one who needed saving. Gently, but firmly, I reached up and peeled her fingers off my sleeve. I have to get back to my station, Dr. Nia, I said. Nia blinked, her hand hovering in the empty air between us. The title, Dr. Nia, hung there like a physical barrier. For as long as we had worked at the hospital, I had called her Nia. Even in front of patients, we had a silent understanding. But now, the professional boundary was the only thing I had left to shield myself. Maya, she began, her brow furrowing. What is that supposed to mean? Why are you being like this? The transition paperwork for Ward 3 needs to be filed before the evening shift, I said, my voice flat, devoid of the familiar warmth she was used to. Excuse me. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back to see if she was watching me. For the first time in my life, the weight of her gaze didn't make me want to turn around and apologize for not being fast enough, smart enough, or good enough. Back at the nurse's station, the hum of the hospital felt different. The sharp smell of antiseptic, the rhythmic beep of monitors from the telemetry ward, the constant rustle of paper. It had all once felt like a stage where I was merely a stagehand, keeping the lights on so Robert and Nia could perform. Now it was just a workplace, a place where I had 30 days left. Maya, can you double-check the 4 fluids for room 402? Nurse Chen asked, sliding a clipboard toward me. Sure, I said, taking the pen. You look quiet today, Chen murmured, leaning in. Did Dr. Robert say something? I saw him in the cafeteria earlier. He looked like he wanted to bite someone's head off. We broke up, I said simply, not looking up from the charts. Chen gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. What? But you two, you've been together since university. Everyone thought it was time, I interrupted, offering her a small, polite smile that didn't reach my eyes. It's fine, Chen, really. She looked at me for a long moment, perhaps trying to find the usual trace of tears or the frantic, nervous energy I usually carried when Robert was angry with me. Finding none, she slowly nodded and went back to her work. I spent the rest of the shift in a state of quiet, methodical focus. I checked for bags, updated patient charts, and helped an elderly patient sit up to drink water. I did it all without the constant, nagging anxiety of wondering if Robert was watching or if Nia would walk in and gently correct the way I was holding the syringe. I was just Maya, An ordinary nurse doing her job, counting down the days. Robert was a man who believed in the power of his own absence. Whenever we had disagreed in the past, usually because I had felt neglected or because he had forgotten an anniversary, he would withdraw. He would stop answering my texts, walk past me in the corridors with a cold, professional nod, and spend his lunch breaks in the doctor's lounge with Nia. It was a punishment designed to make me crave his presence, to make me realize how empty my world was without his brilliance guiding it. And every single time, it had worked. Within 3 days, I would be baking his favorite lemon tarts, waiting by his car in the parking lot, crying and apologizing for being
dramatic.
This time, the silence lasted for 2 weeks. I knew his schedule by heart, so avoiding him wasn't difficult. When I saw his tall figure coming down the hallway, I simply turned into a patient's room or took the service elevator. I stopped packing his favorite lunches. I stopped leaving small notes in his locker. One afternoon, I was in the sterile supply room, stocking a cart with gauze and saline, when the heavy door clicked open. I didn't turn around, assuming it was one of the floor interns. "How long is this going to last, Maya?" The voice was deep, laced with a familiar, tired irritation. "Robert." I kept my back to him, carefully counting the boxes of sterile gloves. "I'm in the middle of stocking the cart, Dr. Robert. If you need something from supplies, the surgical packs are on the top shelf." A heavy silence filled the small, windowless room. I could hear his slow, even breathing. "Dr. Robert?" he repeated, a short, humorless laugh escaping his lips.
Is
that what we're doing now? You're ignoring my texts. You blocked Nia on social media. You're acting like a child throwing a tantrum because she didn't get her way at the toy store. I placed the last box of gloves on the cart, dusted off my scrubs, and finally turned to face him. He was leaning against the doorframe, his white coat immaculate, his stethoscope draped around his neck like a medal. His handsome face was set in a scowl, but beneath the annoyance, there was a flicker of something else, confusion.
he was
Waiting for the familiar sight of my trembling lower lip, the sudden rush of tears, the desperate explanation. "I didn't block Nia to be petty," I said, my voice remarkably steady. "I blocked her because we are no longer friends. And I'm not answering your text because we are no longer together. It's very simple." Robert stepped forward, his brow furrowing deeper. He reached out his hand, instinctively moving toward my face, intending to cut my cheek or ruffle my hair. In that condescending, affectionate way he always did. I stepped back, out of his reach. His hand froze in midair. "Maya, stop this," he said, his voice dropping into a lower register, the tone he used when he was losing his patience. "I know I was harsh in the ER, but Nia was hurt, and you were being unreasonable. I've had 3 double shifts this
weak.
I don't have the energy to play these games with you. Apologize to Nia. Come home tonight, and we can forget this ever happened." I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the sharp line of his jaw, the dark circles under his eyes, the absolute certainty in his gaze that he was offering me a generous olive branch. He truly believed that my life revolved around his forgiveness. "I have nothing to apologize to Nia for," I said quietly. "And I don't live with you anymore, Robert. I moved my things out of your apartment last week while you were on call." He froze. "You what?" "My father helped me," I continued, pushing the supply cart toward the door.
I
"Left my key on the kitchen counter. I took only what was mine. The rest you can throw away." "Maya." He grabbed the edge of the supply cart, stopping it from moving. His knuckles were white. "Are you insane? You moved out over a minor misunderstanding? Where are you even staying?" "That's none of your business," I said. "Please let go of the cart. I have patients waiting." "I don't believe this," he muttered, shaking his head. "You're doing this to
punish me.
You're trying to see how far you can push me before I beg you to come back. Well, it's not going to work. You'll be back in a week, crying about how lonely you are." "Maybe," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "But until then, please keep our interactions strictly professional. Now let go of the cart." He let go as if the metal had suddenly turned red hot. His face was a mask of cold fury. I pushed the cart past him, the small wheels squeaking against the linoleum floor, leaving him alone in the sterile, white room, without me there to act as the buffer. The perfect, seamless world of Robert and Nia began to show its first hairline fractures. In the past, I was the one who managed their lives. Because they were gifted and busy saving lives, I was the one who made sure Robert's dry cleaning was picked up, that Nia's favorite brand of tea was always stocked in the break room, and that their shared research papers were proofread for formatting errors. Before submission, I was the silent engine that kept their brilliant lives running smoothly. Now, that engine had stopped. Has anyone seen the pathology reports for room 305? Nia's voice echoed down the corridor, sharp and stressed. They were sent to your desk yesterday, Dr. Nia, one of the junior nurses replied. They aren't there. I've looked everywhere. Nia snapped, her face flushed with frustration. Normally, I would have intervened, knowing exactly which pile on her chaotic desk she had buried them under. I would have quietly retrieved them, handed her a cup of warm water, and told her to take a deep breath. Instead, I kept my eyes on my monitor, typing out my nursing notes. A few minutes later, Niaz appeared at the nurse's station. Her hair, usually kept in a neat, professional bun, was slightly disheveled. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of helplessness and resentment. Maya, she whispered, leaning over the desk. Can you help me? I can't find the patient history for the coronary bypass scheduled for 2 o'clock. Robert is going to be furious if we don't have it ready. I looked up, my expression blank. I'm sorry, Dr. Nia. That's not my ward.
Today.
You'll have to ask the ward clerk. Maya, please, she pleaded, her voice cracking slightly. I know you're mad at
Me.
but this is a patient's life. Don't let your personal feelings interfere with work. My personal feelings have nothing to do with this, I said calmly. I am currently responsible for 3 post-op patients on this floor.
If I leave my
station to search your desk, I am neglecting my duties. If you can't find the file, I suggest you check the digital archives. Nia stared at me, her mouth slightly open. It was the first time I had ever refused to help her. She had always been the strong one, the one who pulled me along, but now she looked incredibly fragile, lost in a system that didn't care about her brilliance if she couldn't keep her paperwork straight. You've changed, she whispered, a touch of bitterness creeping into her tone. Robert was right. You've become cold. No, I said, returning my gaze to the screen. I just stopped pretending that. Your emergencies are my responsibility. She stood there for another moment, waiting for me to take it back, to soften, to be the adorable, clueless Maya she knew. When I didn't move, she turned on her heel and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. That evening, as the shift change approached, a major emergency occurred.
A
multi-car pileup on the highway brought a wave of trauma patients to the ER. Even though my shift was technically over, the all-hands-on-deck alarm sounded, and I immediately headed down to the emergency room to assist. The ER was a scene of controlled chaos. Screaming sirens, shouting doctors, and the smell of blood and sweat. I was assigned to Trauma Bay 2, assisting a senior resident with a patient who had a severe thoracic injury. Across the room, in Trauma Bay 1, Robert and Nia were working together on a critical patient with a ruptured aorta. Scalpel, Robert commanded, his voice sharp and steady. Nia handed it to him, but her hand shook slightly. The pressure of the day had clearly taken its toll on her. Nia, focus, Robert muttered, his eyes fixed on the field. I need suction. Here. Now. I'm trying, Nia said, her voice strained. The bleeder is too deep, I can't see. I told you to clear the field. Robert roared, his professional calm cracking. What is wrong with you today? You're slow. The entire trauma bay went quiet for a split second. The other nurses and residents kept their heads down, embarrassed by the sudden outburst. Nia's face went pale under her mask. She swallowed hard, her eyes filling with tears of frustration and shame. Usually when Robert got like this, I would step in. I would gently take the suction tip or offer a soothing word to calm Robert's temper, taking the blame myself so they could keep working as a perfect team. This time, I didn't even look over. I kept my hand steady, assisting my resident as we successfully stabilized our patient's chest tube. Good job, Nurse Maya, the resident said, wiping his brow. Let's get this one up to the ICU. Thank you, doctor, I said. As we wheeled the gurney out of the bay, I passed Robert and Nia. Robert's eyes met mine for a brief second. There was a desperate, pleading look in them. A silent demand for me to fix the tension, to be the buffer that made his genius comfortable again. I looked away, guiding the gurney through the double doors. Their brilliant, high-pressure world was theirs to manage. I was no longer their shock absorber. 30 days went by both agonizingly slow and incredibly fast. I spent my final week packing up the small locker I had kept at the hospital for 3 years. There wasn't much: a spare set of scrubs, a mug with a faded cartoon, nurse on it, a couple of medical textbooks I had bought hoping to understand Robert's world better, and a framed photo of Robert, Nia, and me on our graduation day. In the photo, Robert and Nia were standing in the center holding their diplomas. Hi, looking radiant and victorious. I was standing slightly to the side, holding a bouquet of flowers, smiling widely, but looking somehow smaller, like a shadow cast by their brilliance. I took the photo out of the frame. I kept the frame, but I tore the photo in half, separating myself from them. I threw their half into the recycling bin and placed my own small, smiling face into my bag. On my final afternoon, I went to the Human Resources Department to sign my exit papers. The HR director, a kind woman named Mrs. Higgins, looked over my file with a soft sigh. "You've been a wonderful nurse, Maya," she said, signing the bottom of the form. "Your evaluations are excellent. It's a shame to lose you. Are you sure you don't want to transfer to another department? Or perhaps take a leave of absence?" "No, thank you, Mrs. Higgins," I said, feeling a strange, light sensation in my
Chest.
"I need a clean break. I'm going to find out what I actually like doing outside of medicine." "Well, I wish you the very best of luck," she said, handing me my copy of the paperwork. "The world is much larger than this hospital, dear." "Thank you. I'm starting to realize that." As I walked out of the HR office, I felt a sudden sense of peace. The heavy, suffocating blanket of inadequacy that had draped over my shoulders for years had finally slipped off. I wasn't the stupid one anymore. I was just someone who had been trying to climb a mountain that wasn't mine to conquer. I went back to the ward to say my goodbyes to the nursing staff. Chun gave me a tight hug, and several of the other nurses handed me a small box of chocolates and a card they had all signed. "We'll miss you, Maya," Chun said, her eyes tearing up. "You were the only one who always remembered how everyone took their coffee." "I'm sure you'll manage just fine without me," I smiled, hugging her back. I was carrying my box of belongings toward the exit when a hand gripped my
Elbow.
I stopped and turned. It was Robert. He looked exhausted, his hair messy, his tie loose around his
Collar.
He looked at the box in my arms and then at my face. The realization that I was actually leaving, that this wasn't a phase or a game, finally seemed to hit him. "Maya," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "What is this? What are you doing?" "I'm leaving, Robert," I said. "Today is my last day." "You're quitting?" he asked, his voice rising in disbelief. "Because of a breakup?" "Maya, this is your career. You went through nursing school for this. You're throwing your entire life away just to spite me?" "I'm not doing this to spite you," I said, keeping my voice low so as not to draw attention. "I'm doing this because I never wanted to be a nurse. I only did
It because you told me to.
I did it because I thought it was the only way you would ever look at me." Robert stared at me, his eyes wide with shock. That's ridiculous.
I
Wanted you here so we could be together. I wanted to help you. Nia and I." "Nia, and you have your own world," I interrupted. "And there was never any room in it for me. You didn't want a partner, Robert. You wanted an admirer.
You.
Wanted someone to stand in the corner and clap while you and Nia saved the day." "That's not true," he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. He reached out to grab my hand, but I pulled away, holding the box tighter against my chest. "It is true," I said. "And the sad part is, I let you do it. I let you make me feel small for 3 years because I thought that was the price of your love. But I'm done paying it." "Maya, please," he pleaded, a sudden, rare look of panic crossing his face.
We can talk about this.
"I'll make time. We'll go on a real date. Just don't leave like this." "Goodbye, Robert," I said. I turned and walked toward the sliding glass doors of the lobby. "Maya," he called out after me, but I didn't stop. As the automatic doors slid open, a gust of fresh, cool afternoon air hit my
Face.
I took a deep, clear breath, smelling the scent of damp earth and upcoming rain, free of the sterile sting of bleach. I stepped out into the sunshine and, for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. My parents lived in a small, quiet town about 2 hours north of the city. Their house was an old, wooden craftsman-style home with a sprawling backyard that my father had turned into a chaotic, beautiful botanical nursery. When I arrived with my small car packed with my belongings, My father was in the yard, wearing his dusty overalls, weeding a bed of lavender.
He looked up, wiped
his brow with the back of his hand, and gave me a wide, warm smile. "Look who's home," he said, walking over to give me a dusty, earth-scented hug. My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron.
She didn't ask
Me about Robert or why I had quit my job or what my plans were. She just took one look at my face, smiled softly, and said, "Go wash up, sweetheart. Dinner is almost ready." For the first few weeks, I did nothing but sleep and breathe. I slept past 6 a.m. for the first time in years. I sat on the back porch with a mug of black coffee, watching the morning mist rise off the hills. I helped my father in the nursery. At first, I was clumsy. I broke a clay pot, and I accidentally overwatered a batch of delicate ferns. I immediately froze, expecting the familiar, sharp sigh of disappointment that Robert or Nia would have given me. But my father just laughed, ruffled my hair, not in Robert's patronizing way, but with genuine affection, and said, "Don't worry about it, Maya. Plants are resilient. They know how to heal if you give them time and space. Just try again. They know how to heal if you give them time and space." The words stayed with me. I began to study the plants. I learned the names of the wildflowers, the soil compositions, the exact amount of sunlight each seedling needed to thrive. Unlike the sterile, unforgiving environment of the hospital, where a single mistake could be fatal, the nursery was a place of patience and growth.
if a
Leaf withered, we pruned it, nourished the soil, and waited for a new shoot to appear. I realized that I wasn't stupid. My mind just didn't belong in the cold, mechanical world of anatomy and surgical procedures. Here, in the quiet dirt, under the open sky, my hands were steady. I could feel the life in the soil, and I knew instinctively how to care for it. "You have a natural touch with the orchids," my father remarked one afternoon, watching me carefully repot a delicate white phalaenopsis. "Most people are too rough with them, or they ignore them.
but you listen to them.
They just want to be left alone to grow," I murmured, gently pressing the moss around the roots. "They don't like being forced. Just like you, sweetheart," my father said softly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I'm glad you're home." I looked down at the white orchid. For the first time, I felt a quiet sense of pride in my own work. It wasn't a complex cardiothoracic surgery, and it wouldn't be published in any prestigious medical journals, but it was mine.
It
was quiet, beautiful, and real. Back in the city, the hospital was adjusting to life without Maya. Initially, Robert and Nia had assumed my departure was a temporary dramatic exit. They expected me to call within a week, begging for my job back or asking Robert to meet for coffee. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into a month, the reality of my absence began to sink in. And with my absence came a sudden, uncomfortable shift in their own dynamic. Without me to act as their audience, the thrill of their shared genius began to fade. There was no longer anyone to look at them with wide, adoring eyes, making them feel like gods in white coats. Instead, they were just two highly stressed, overworked doctors facing the harsh, daily grind of a busy hospital. "Robert, have you reviewed the pre-op charts for the valve replacement?" Nia asked, walking into his office without knocking. Robert was rubbing his temples, a stack of unorganized patient files piled high on his desk. "Not yet, Nia.
I'm Buse.
The ward nurses keep messing up the shift schedules, and I had to spend an hour correcting them." "Well, you need to look at them now," Nia said, her voice sharp.
The
"Anesthesiologist is waiting, and I don't want to look unprepared in front of the chief." Robert looked up, his eyes cold. "If you're so worried about it, why don't you do it yourself? You're the co-surgeon on this case, aren't you?" Nia stiffened. "Excuse me? I have my own rounds to complete, Robert. I'm not your assistant." "No, but you're my partner," Robert snapped. "And lately you've been dragging your feet. You made a mistake on the suture line during yesterday's procedure. If I hadn't noticed, the patient would have bled out." Nia's face flushed with anger. "It was a minor slip, and I corrected it.
You
Don't need to lecture me like I'm one of your residents. I am your equal, Robert." "Then start acting like it," Robert muttered, turning back to his computer. Nia stood there, her hands clenched into fists. For years, they had been the golden duo, their minds perfectly synchronized, their conversations flowing
seamlessly.
but without Maya to absorb their stress, to be the clueless one. They could both laugh at or guide. They had begun to turn their sharp, perfectionist edges on each other. They tried to date. They went to the high-end Italian restaurant they had always talked about, but without Maya there to make them feel superior, they found they had very little to say to each other. The risotto is slightly overcooked, Robert remarked, poking at his plate. It's fine, Robert, Nia said, sipping her wine. You're always so critical. I'm not critical, Nia. I just appreciate precision. Unlike you, who seems content with mediocrity lately. Nia set her glass down with a sharp click. I am not mediocre.
I worked just as
hard as you did to get where I am. You're just frustrated because Maya isn't here to play the doting housewife for you anymore. The mention of my name hung in the air like a heavy, suffocating cloud. Don't bring Maya into this, Robert said, his voice dropping into a dangerous whisper. Why not? Nia countered, a bitter laugh escaping her. It's the truth, isn't
it.
You miss having someone who worshipped the ground you walked on. You miss having a girl who would tolerate your temper tantrums and clean up your mess. Well, guess what, Robert? I'm not Maya. I will never be your shadow. And I don't want you to be, Robert said, standing up and throwing his napkin onto the table. But I also don't want a partner who constantly competes with
me.
He walked out of the restaurant, leaving Nia sitting alone at the table, surrounded by the expensive, tasteless food. 2 months after I left the hospital, a sleek, black sedan pulled up the gravel driveway of my father's botanical nursery. I was in the greenhouse, misting a row of young ferns, when I heard the car door
slam.
I didn't think much of it, assuming it was a customer looking for summer perennials. Maya? The voice made me freeze. The spray bottle slipped from my hand, clattering against the wooden bench. I turned slowly. Robert was standing at the entrance of the greenhouse. He looked entirely out of place among the lush green leaves and damp earth. He was wearing a designer suit, his shoes covered in a light layer of dust from our driveway. He looked thinner, his face drawn, his eyes scanning the greenhouse before finally settling on me. I was wearing an old, faded t-shirt, dirt-stained jeans, and my hair was tied up in a messy bun with a pencil holding it in place. My hands were covered in dark
soil.
For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the gentle drip of water from the ceiling pipes. You look different, he said finally, his voice lacking its usual authority. I am different, Robert, I said, picking up the spray bottle and placing it on the shelf. What are you doing here? He took a step forward, his eyes darting to my dirt-stained hands. I came to find you. You didn't leave a forwarding address. I had to ask Chin for your parents' location. You shouldn't have done that, I said calmly. I left because I wanted to be left alone. Maya, please, he said, taking another step closer. Look at you. You're working in the dirt. You're a trained nurse, Maya. You have a degree. You're wasting your life here. I let out a soft, genuine laugh. It wasn't bitter or angry. It was just a laugh of pure amusement at how little he understood me. I'm not wasting my life, Robert, I said, looking around the green, sunlit
space.
For the first time in my life, I'm actually living it. I'm growing things. I'm helping things live. I don't have to worry about being perfect here. The plants don't judge me if I don't know the Latin name for their root rot on the first try. They just need care, patience, and love. Things you and Nia know nothing about. Robert's face tightened. Nia and I were not together anymore. I blinked, slightly surprised, but the feeling was fleeting.
Oh.
I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? He asked, his voice filled with a desperate intensity. Maya, it was a mistake. All of it. I realized how much you did for me. For us. The apartment is empty. I can't find anything. I missed a surgery last week because I was so distracted. I need you, Maya. I want you to come back. He reached out and grabbed my hands, ignoring the dirt that immediately smeared onto his expensive suit sleeves. His hands were shaking. Come back to the city with me, he pleaded. We can start over. I'll get you a job at a different clinic somewhere less stressful. I'll buy a bigger apartment. We can get married. Just, please, don't leave me like this. I looked down at his hands grasping mine. Once, this would have been my dream. The brilliant, unattainable Dr. Robert, begging me to marry him, telling me he needed me. I would have dropped everything, packed my bags, and run back to his side, content to spend the rest of my life serving his genius. But looking at him now, I felt nothing but a profound, quiet pity.
He didn't love me.
He didn't even know who I was. He just loved the version of me that existed to make him feel big. He loved the comfort I provided, the ego boost, the silent buffer that made his difficult life easier. Gently, I pulled my hands out of his grip. I can't do that, Robert, I said quietly. Why? He cried, his voice cracking with desperation. I'm offering you everything you ever wanted.
I'm apologizing.
What more do you want from me? I don't want anything from you anymore, I said, looking him in the eyes. That's the point. I spent 3 years trying to fit into a mold you made for
Me.
I shrunk myself. I made myself look stupid. I let you and Nia treat me like a child, just so I could deserve a place by your side. But I don't want to be small anymore, Robert. I like the space I take up here. Maya, you should go, I said, stepping back into the shadow of the ferns. Your world is in the city, with the lights, the surgeries, and the praise. My world is here in the dirt. We don't belong in the same place. He stared at me, his chest heaving, his face pale with a sudden, crushing weight of finality. He looked at my calm, steady eyes, my dirty jeans, the peaceful green of the greenhouse, and he finally realized that there was no adorable, clueless Maya left to save. Slowly, without saying another word, he turned and walked out of the greenhouse. I watched his black sedan back down the gravel driveway, kicking up a small cloud of dust until it disappeared around the bend. The summer turned into autumn. The leaves in the nursery turned gold and crimson, and the air grew crisp and cool. One Saturday afternoon, as we were closing up the nursery for the day, a woman got out of a taxi at the gate. She was wearing a thick wool coat, her hands shoved deep into her pockets.
Nia.
She didn't look like the brilliant, untouchable cardiothoracic surgeon I had
Known.
She looked tired, her shoulders slumped, her hair loose and windblown. She stood by the gate, looking at the sign Greenwood Botanical Nursery, and then at me. I was carrying a flat of winter pansies toward the shed. I stopped, set the tray down, and stood there, waiting. Nia walked slowly up the path. She stopped a few feet away from me, her eyes sweeping over my face, my clothes, and the peaceful yard around us. You look good, Maya, she said, her voice quiet, almost shy.
Thanks, I said.
What are you doing here, Nia? She swallowed hard, her fingers twitching in her pockets. I wanted to see
you.
I wanted to apologize. I didn't say anything, letting the silence stretch between us. I didn't realize, she began, her eyes filling with tears. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. When we were younger, I wanted to protect you, because the teachers were so mean to you. I thought I was being a good friend, but I got used to being the smart one. I got used to being the one who had her life together, while you were the one who needed help. She looked down, a tear escaping and trailing down her cheek. And when Robert came along, it was so easy to fall into that dynamic with him. We both looked
down on you, Maya.
We made you the buffer, so we didn't have to face our own
flaws.
And when you left, we fell apart. We couldn't handle each other's perfectionism. We didn't have you to make us feel gentle anymore. I listened to her, feeling a strange, hollow sensation in my chest. She was
right.
They had used me. But hearing her admit it didn't bring me the rush of satisfaction I might have expected. It just made me feel a deep, quiet sadness for the years we had wasted playing those roles. I'm glad you realized that, Nia, I said softly. Can you forgive me? She sobbed, taking a step toward me. I miss my best friend, Maya. I miss the girl who used to study with me under the old oak tree. I don't want to be Dr. Nia with you. I just want to be Nia. I looked at her, my childhood friend, the girl who had once shared her lunch with me and told me I was beautiful when I felt invisible. I did forgive her.
I
didn't hold any anger or resentment toward her anymore. The soil had washed all of that away. But forgiveness didn't mean going back. I forgive you, Nia, I said, offering her a small, genuine smile. I really
do.
Her face lit up with a sudden, hopeful smile. Does that mean we can be friends again?
Can I call you?
Can we get coffee? No, I said gently. The hope drained from her face, leaving her looking lost and confused.
Why? If
you forgive me. Because we aren't those girls anymore, I explained, gesturing to the space around us. You are a brilliant surgeon, Nia. That is your life, and you should be proud of it. But I am not the girl who needs saving anymore. I don't want to be around anyone who reminds me of how small I used to feel. I need to move forward, not backward. Nia stared at me, the tears flowing freely now. She looked at my steady posture, The calm strength in my eyes, and she knew I was speaking the truth. I had outgrown her. I had outgrown the need for her protection. I understand, she whispered, wiping her face with her sleeve. I'm glad you're happy, Maya.
You deserve to be. Thank you, Nia, I said.
You too. She turned and walked back down the path toward the waiting taxi. She didn't look back, and this time, I didn't feel any urge to call her name. As the taxi drove away, I picked up the flat of pansies and carried them into the warm, soil-scented greenhouse. A year later, the nursery was thriving. We had expanded our greenhouse, and my father and I had started offering weekend workshops on urban gardening and plant
care.
I had designed the curriculum myself, simple, practical, and focused on the joy of watching things grow. The workshops were always packed with people from the city, looking for a break from their busy, stressful lives. One sunny Saturday morning, I was setting up the tables for a workshop on propagation when a young man walked into the greenhouse. He had a camera hanging around his neck and a notepad in his hand. "Excuse me," he said, his voice friendly and polite. "Are you Maya?" "Yes, I am," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. "I'm Leo from the local paper," he said, holding out his hand. "I'm here to write a feature on your workshops. Your father said you were the one who started them." I shook his hand, feeling the warm, firm grip. "Nice to meet you, Leo. Yes, I handle the education side of the nursery." "Great," he smiled, looking around the vibrant green space. "I have to admit, I've been looking forward to this assignment. I tried growing some tomatoes on my balcony this summer, and they all died.
I'm hoping you can teach me how to
keep something alive." I laughed, a warm, easy sound that echoed through the greenhouse. "Don't worry. Plants are very patient. They'll always give you another chance." "I'm glad to hear that," he said, his eyes lingering on my face with a quiet, genuine admiration that had nothing to do with what I could do for him, but simply who I was. "Where should we start?" "Let's start with the soil," I said, picking up a handful of rich, dark earth. "Everything begins with the foundation.
If you give the roots the right space to
grow, the rest will take care of itself." He nodded, writing down my words with a quiet intensity, his eyes bright with interest. I looked down at the dark soil in my hands and then out at the blue, open sky. Beyond the glass, I was no longer trailing behind anyone. I was no longer the third person in the frame or the shadow in the corner. I was Maya. My feet were planted firmly in the ground. My hands were full of life, and the horizon ahead was wide, open, and entirely mine to build.